Okay, it looks like we are all systems go. Another fantastic turnout. So thank you all again for coming. My name's Perry Dybel. I've kind of been running this group now for about 18 months. I don't know what I always like to do at the start of each meetup is to find out who is coming for the first time. So if you can just raise your hand if you're a first time attendee. Yeah, not too bad. So about a quarter to a third of people coming for the first time. So I hope you enjoy it. Spread the word because our meetups are pretty popular, as you can see. So just the first few simple things, like if you need the toilets and stuff, there out through the exit straight over the corridor and on the right hand side. If there is a fire alarm or anything in the building, please don't use the lifts. You have to follow the signs to use the stairwells. So that's the health and safety over and done with. In terms of a couple of upcoming talks to tell you about, on the 17th of March, there's a Google Developers event at Skills Matter about progressive web apps. I tweeted it out earlier today, the link to sign up for that event. It's a free event. I think it's from like midday through to early evening. So it's kind of like a half-day commitment, but a lot of big name speakers speaking at that one, Jake Archibald and other people of his ilk. So that's a good one to go to if you would like to learn more about progressive web apps. The meetup that we've got for April is on the Tuesday, the 5th of April, and that's going to be Andrew Nielsen from Marks and Spencer's. The talk will be here. I know we sort of like had our meetup at Marks and Spencer's last month, but the talk will be here. And basically he's going to be doing an update to talk that he gave at Velocity in November, which is about really how they created a performance culture at Marks and Spencer's and now got all the measurement in place, and they really pay attention to it. So whilst it's particularly pertinent to if you come from a larger business to like getting that performance culture, it is a very interesting talk for everyone. So it's well worth coming to. The last one, if you've got any Welsh people in the audience, happy St. David's Day. So we'll just like finish off with that one. So in terms of the running order for tonight, first up, we're going to have Oliver Ash from The Guardian, going to talk to us about how implementing an offline page for The Guardian, basically talk about service workers. That's around about 25 minutes to 30 minutes, that talk. Then we'll have kind of about a 10-minute break for everybody to get a drink and stuff like that. And then we're going to have talk from Fastly, and I'm sorry, but I've forgotten your name because I knew it was Arta that was coming. So if you just like call out your name again, please. Tyler, that's right. Tyler, who's the CTO of Fastly, is going to like pick up and give us a talk about what we can learn from CDNs in terms of performance for web apps and stuff like that. So, and again, that talk is around half an hour. And then I've got all the pizzas and stuff turning up at about 8:30, as long as Domino's don't let me down. Okay, so anyway, so I'll hand over now to Oliver, and hope you enjoy the talks tonight. All the best laid plans. Tom, do you want to just give a sound check into there?
Can you hear me, everyone?
Yeah,
great.
That's good. Right, so you
cool.
Plug that in.
Thank you.
Okay,
are you ready?
Should be good to go.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm going to be talking about how and why I built an offline page for theguardian.com. But before I get started, great. Okay, so I'm a software engineer at The Guardian, if you haven't inferred that from the title of the talk. I used to work on Composer, which was the Guardian's digital content management system that you can see here. But now I work on theguardian.com, just full stack developing the website. We went live a year ago, doing feature development, A/B testing, this sort of thing. So with regards to offline service workers, I want to start by doing a sort of battle between web and native, and how do these different platforms perform under poor network conditions. So when my slides work, sorry. Sorry, 1 second. Cool. Yeah, so I'm going to do a comparison of web and native. So native, when you open the app, the content is cached. So the next time you open the app and you're offline, you still get the same experience. This is the Guardian app. I'm offline, I'm in airplane mode. But I can still navigate the app. I can still open the articles. The same happens when the server's down. I can't make that connection, but because I have the content cached, it still works. And if I have a poor connection, well, the app will show the stale content, the content I have cached, and it will try to get the new content. And when it arrives, it will bring in the new content. We all know this because we all use native apps. And of course, if you're on a good connection, the same thing will happen, but the new content will appear much faster. But on the web, well, open up theguardian.com and you're offline, you get nothing. You do get this game if you tap the dinosaur. I'm not very good at it because, as you can see, I hit the first obstacle. But if the server's down, the same, you don't get anything. And if you have a poor connection, you're just going to be staring at a white screen until you finally get the response. If you have a good connection, then finally you get the content you want. But there's a big, you can see that the web is inferior to native apps here. But we can do better. So theguardian.com, we built an offline page. As you can see here, I'm online. Go offline. Refresh because I'm offline, and you get a page like this. And for fun, you can play crosswords. So in this talk, I'm going to talk about how we built that. Quick note, it used to be theguardian.com/info. We're testing this on a small part website. It's now info developer blog. I just haven't updated the video. OK, so how does it work? OK, to explain this, I'm going to break it down into 4 parts. And the first one is about creating and registering what's called a service worker. But what is a service worker? OK, there's been loads of talks about service worker recently. But I'm just briefly going to say, for anyone who isn't aware, it's a script that runs in the background, and it's good for features that don't require user interaction. So for example, this might be listening to push events and sending a notification. It might be intercepting and handling network requests, which is exactly what we do for the offline page, as you'll see. But in the future, it will be used for other things like background sync, if you have some data that you want to periodically update. And it will be used for geofencing as well. So if you want to perform an action when a user arrives at a certain location. At the moment, it's only available, the caveat service worker is it's HTTPS only. And it's available today in Chrome and Firefox. So I mentioned it's HTTPS only. But if you're observant, you'll know that the Guardian isn't HTTPS. But we are starting to move parts of the website over, we've got /science, /info, /crosswords. And internally, we have an opt-in, so we're testing it and we're trying to push forward as fast as we can. The problems with moving to HTTPS are ads primarily. So I said the first thing we're going to do to build the offline page is create and register a service worker. So let's just create an empty file, call it service-worker.js. And in our HTML, we can tell the browser to register the service worker just like this. Simple enough. But right now, nothing's really happening. So when we make a request for theguardian.com, the request will go to the to the server and back. We have a service worker that's not being used. So how do you know if you have a service worker installed? Really quickly, you can open up Chrome DevTools, go to Resources, Service Worker. You'll see it in there. One really handy tip is you can inspect the service worker as if it was its own window. Likewise, in Firefox, you can go to About Debugging. OK, the second thing we're going to do, we're going to use what's called the install event. So the install event is called, of course, when the service worker gets registered. And it's an opportunity for you to prepare. So in our case, we want to prime the cache. We want to download some resources that will be used for the offline page. So you can see at the bottom. Can everyone see the codes? Yep. In the install event, I'm just calling a function called update cache. That function uses a new cache API that came with the service worker API to download the assets that are needed. So we have some HTML for the offline page, some JavaScript, and some CSS. OK. So now we have a service worker, and we have a cache that contains the things we need for the offline page, but nothing's happening. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to intercept requests with the fetch event. So the fetch event gets called whenever the browser makes a request for the domain that the service worker is registered on, in this case, theguardian.com. The default fetch would do just what the browser would do anyway, which is make a request to the server and return the response. But you can override it. In this example here, at the bottom of this code, I'm overriding it, but it's actually the same behavior as the default, which is just to make that request to the server and respond with it. But we're gonna use this to do more exciting things. So we could return a response from the cache and not go to the network altogether. Or you could create a custom response. Cool. OK, so now we have a service worker that's actually being used. The requests are going through the service worker and back. Just a quick note to give you an idea of the flexibility you have when using the fetch event. You can actually construct your own responses. So in this example, I've got a string of HTML, just a hello world in a H1. And I can use the response constructor to create an object that I can respond with. So this will actually respond with a page saying H1 hello world. This would be useful for templating. You might use your service worker to request some JSON and then do the templating in the service worker and respond to the page with the HTML. It can be used for other things as well, of course. OK, so we have a fetch event, and it's just making the request to the server and back. But we need to do something special to make this offline page work. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to break this down into two parts. I'm going to show you how we handle HTML requests. And then I'm going to show you how we handle requests for assets, so JavaScript and CSS and that sort of thing. So this code is the same as what you saw before, but now I'm just guarding the fetch to say only do this if it's a HTML request. So this isn't really that useful in itself, but we need it to move on to the next thing. The way you do that is you can look at the request headers. Does this request accept HTML? If so. So what we would like for HTML is we would like to go to the server first. If we get a response, we'll use that. Otherwise, we're going to go to the cache. And if there's something in the cache, we want to use that instead. This is called network first. And in our case, we're going to go to the server, try to get the HTML for the page. And if not, we're going to return the offline page that we have in our cache. This is the code we had before. And what we can do in order to do this network first approach is we can catch the error that the fetch event will give to us if the server response fails because you're offline. And then we can just retrieve the item that's in our cache and respond with that. So now we're responding with the HTML for the offline page. That's great. But we also need to handle assets. So if you make a request for some JavaScript at the moment, because it's not HTML, it's not going to use this logic we have, and it's just going to fail to make that request because you're offline. What we'd really like is, for assets, we want to, because assets are versioned in the URL, we know that we can just go straight to the cache. We don't need to try and get a fresh version. So we can, that's what we want to achieve. We just want to go straight to the cache. So the way we do that is we say, if it's not HTML, then go straight to the cache. We'll see if there's an item in the cache that matches the request. But this isn't going to work entirely, because if you're online and you make a request for an asset that isn't cached, then that just won't work. So what we really want to do is something like this. We want to go to the cache first. And if that fails, then we'll go to the server. And this is a pattern commonly known as cache first. OK, so what does that look like in our code? This is the code we had before. And because caches.match returns a promise, we can see if there was a result. And if there wasn't, then we'll make the request. OK, the next part is how do we update the crossword? The Guardian publishes a new crossword every day. And ideally, if you have the offline page, whenever you go offline, you'll get the latest crossword. We have some really avid crossword users on the Guardian, so they would really like this. The way we're currently doing this is in the global scope of our service worker, we just have some code that says, is the cache updated? If it's not, then update the cache and delete the old cache. You don't need to worry about the implementation here, which is why I've kind of diluted the code. But the key idea is this runs every time the service worker starts up. And that actually happens quite often because the browser will close the service worker in order to save memory. So every time you make a request to that site, the browser will have to start the service worker again if it's not already up. And this code will run and will update the crossword. But in the future, we would like to use background sync, which is a new API that allows you to do something like this more formally. You can update your cache on a schedule. So we might say update the cache every morning, but that's not available yet. Cool. OK, so we have an offline page, and it works. In the future, LDN.com, we might use service workers for various things. But firstly, the offline page is going to increase in significance because we are moving to HTTPS. And as browsers adopt service worker, Chrome and Firefox already have, more people will be seeing the offline page. So we would like to extend it to do, I don't know, any ideas really, but right now the ideas we have, we could show stale content like the native apps do. So you open theguardian.com and you're offline, and you'll get the same content that you saw last time you visited. We could be more clever. We could use this as an opportunity to change the content that you see when you're offline. We could show personalized content that's downloaded ahead of time. So we know what articles you've read recently. We're going to download 10 articles related to the things you like every morning, so you can read them on your commute to work, which I believe is what the FT are working on, as Patrick has kindly added there. Or we already have a feature called Save for Later, so maybe we'll do something along those lines where we'll download the content that the user has saved for later. But there's also one other point that I want to mention. We could, one thing that would be really nice is if we went offline first. What does offline first mean? To me, it means that as soon as you make a request, you respond with a shell of the page. And that shell has some JavaScript that will be responsible for loading the rest of the content. But the good thing about this is you get a response immediately, just like on native apps. As soon as you tap on an action, you'll get a response. You don't have to wait for the network. And yeah, the good thing about this is it improves the experience for people with poor connections. As we saw earlier, the web is really inferior to native apps. When you have a poor connection, you're just going to be staring at a white screen until that response is complete. You can already do this sort of pattern with client-side rendering today, but that doesn't really solve the problem for the first load. So if you have client-side rendering, when you have a good network connection, you'll get the shell of the page, and then the JavaScript will handle the navigation behavior from there on. But if you have a poor connection and you haven't yet loaded the website, well, that's just not really going to perform very well. So with the shell architecture and service workers, the service worker will respond with the shell of the page immediately. It doesn't need to go to the network. Just to quickly demo, this is a very hacky demo. This is kind of what the web is like today. You tap on an article, building an offline page for theguardian.com, and a few seconds later, it loads. But if you have a bad connection, you're just going to be sitting there waiting. And you see people like tapping the link 5 times because they think nothing's happening. But in native apps, you have a behavior more like this. You tap on an article, and you'll get a response. You'll get a shell of the page whilst the rest of the content loads. OK, so why is this valuable? I admit I kind of built this because it's fun. But right now, the offline page has insignificant usage due to HTTPS support, browser support. But it's good to plant the seed for this sort of thing. And I believe maybe a year from now, loads of people will be seeing the offline page. And we can really start to innovate on what content we show on that page. The other good thing about this is you can iron out browser bugs. When you build something large scale, you really start to identify bugs in browser implementation. So I've actually found various bugs in Firefox, various bugs in Chrome, all of which are being fixed now. My point is that doing something like this is pushing the web forward. I like this quote from Node and Norton. If you only use features that work in IE8, then you're condemning yourself to live in an IE8 world. The point is that experimenting with new things, even if they're not going to be that visible right now, is good because it's driving the web forward. So as I said, yeah, I had a few bugs, browser bugs in Chrome and Firefox. I won't really get into what those were, but they were quite nasty because the service worker is intercepting all requests. Even if you're not handling those requests, there might be a bug in the implementation. The one in our case was it was dropping cookies, so comments didn't work on HTTPS sections, which is quite frustrating. But that's the sort of compromise you take when you experiment with something like this on a large website. Another kind of problem I had was with the CDN that we have. So what was happening was you had two different versions of the service worker and the offline page cached in the CDN, and they referred to different assets. So the offline page would work, but the CSS wouldn't load or something like that. But we solved this by developing something along the lines of like a manifest that you could request, and it would contain all of the HTML and all of the asset URIs that you needed to download the offline page. I think a bunch of people are going to have this CDN cache problem if you're doing something in production and you have a CDN. So it'd be, if you want to talk to me about that, feel free to catch me afterwards. OK, so in conclusion, service workers allow us to define richer experiences for users who are offline, but also improve the performance for users with poor connections. And it's really easy to build an offline page. So I would be really happy if this talk inspired someone to have a go and improve the experience for users who are offline or those with poor connections. I'll put these slides up on Slider deck later, and I'll send the link out. So these are some further reading links that I would recommend. I wrote a blog post about how I built the offline page, which is kind of similar to this talk, if you want to refer to that. And a great explainer on, can't remember his name, but it's a really good explainer. And thank you, Alex Russell. And finally, you can check out our service worker if you go to theguardian.com/service-worker.js. Admittedly, it's not as clean as the code you've seen here because I've had to work around browser bugs, but only a few, so it's not been too bad. OK, and thank you. That's it.
Still muted, but we'll find out. No, it's working. Right, so we've got some time for some questions. So has anybody got, we'll come out and we'll get some done. Right, come to the middle and then we'll come out.
Hi, so we've been prototyping a few ideas with service workers, and the thing I can't really get my head around is how to write a good test suite around service workers. I was wondering if you had an experience or if anyone had any good experience writing a test suite.
OK, I don't have any experience doing that, so I'd love to hear from anyone who does. I think it's a really good point, because your service worker is handling all of the requests for that domain. So if you make a mistake, then potentially every request is going to fail. So yeah, you really do need to be careful, and writing tests is a great idea. I'm not sure what I would do. Let's chat more about this afterwards.
Yeah, mine chimes in quite nicely with that, but not so much the development test suite, but the ongoing, once you've got this beast out there, the ongoing monitoring and validation assurance of the content. I could see lots of curveballs in there. Would you do it visually, or how would you do it?
Do you mean if we take down a piece of content and how?
Well, how do you just basically, you know what the service worker related content is supposed to do, and you know what it potentially could do is a negative if you weren't careful. Now, how do you validate on an ongoing basis? So after the thing, this is after your testing stuff, after the application's out there, to ensure on an ongoing basis that it's working, so that you can intervene rapidly if it isn't, etc. So you could do it, I suppose, just at the presentation layer. You could just look at visual content. You know, you could have some test content in the corner or something that was, I don't know. But other than that, I mean, particularly if you got push content, difficult.
Yeah, I can't really think of an answer other than having tests for your service worker. But I'm sure Patrick will have something to add.
Who's going to go first?
I think the simple answer to that is you observe your analytics, and so that if you can send a different analytical beacon if the page was rendered straight from the service worker versus where it came from your server. And so I know for a fact that the Guardian do, and I know that the FT do, that we have monitoring on analytics. And even if our page views drop by a percentage of, say, 10% in a day, we'll have alarms that go off, and we know that that something's gone wrong. But I think that the best way of solving that is by sending beacons both from content that is surged by a service worker and content that's served online. The good news is that inside a service worker, you still have access, obviously, to the Fetch API and HTTP, so you can actually send requests, analytical beacons from within the service worker. The new Send Beacon API is perfect to do that because it's fully asynchronous as well.
That leads nicely into my question, but also I think if you use WebDriver, you could probably get some basic smoke tests. My question was, you said you got little to or insignificant usage on your offline page. How did you know if it was offline with people using it? How did you get the analytics data?
Simply because no one goes to the /info section. But we should definitely add tracking to the offline page. And
do you have a solution for offline analytics?
Not currently, no. But I think when we come to look at this, we'll look to native apps and see what ideas they have. Maybe persisting something in local storage so that when the user next navigates in the online, you can send that data forward. But yeah, I'd be really interested to hear, because we haven't really got to that scale, we haven't had to worry about that yet.
Okay, I'll come to you. There's a question from the back. I'll just go there first. I need some exercise.
Thanks, Oliver. You drew a few parallels between native apps and mobile web, especially on poor connections. Native apps are a bit of an advantage because they can get the connection state. So if you're talking about downloading lots of articles, do you think we're reliant on the Network Information API to say you are on Wi-Fi, let's download a lot of content, or should we just go for it anyway and use people's data allowance?
That's a very good question, and I guess ethically, I wouldn't like to try and download a ton of content every morning without knowing that the user does have a good connection. And I guess for something like what native apps do, the stale while we validate pattern, that kind of comes for free because the user has already incurred that network request, and you can cache it once that network request has been done. But yeah. Yep, exactly, yeah. I wouldn't like to say really, but personally, I think I would like to wait for the NetInfo API in order to know that the user has a good connection.
Yeah,
I just kind of wanted to say in relation to your question about persisting the data while offline, there's a solution that we have where I work at Media, where we've implemented like a persistent data layer API. And there's a guy called Simo Eheva that does a nice blog post on it.
Okay.
But yeah, it's essentially just using local storage, like you said, and then just grab that stuff when you need it after when you have a connection.
Okay, cool, great. That's good to know. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to go over to the left this side, all right, because we haven't had any questions from this side. So balance it out a little bit.
How would cache content work with user authenticated coming in play?
So you can, in my mind, you can cache a response by URL. So I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I'd have to think through that. I'm not sure if you can cache and vary on the cookies, which is what you might want to do if it's an authenticated response. I don't know. Yeah.
Tricky question, that one.
That's a tricky question. Yeah.
Right, there was some more down this side. Can you just raise your hands again, please?
You said there was an issue with ad servers. I was just wondering what those issues are and how you can get around them.
Yep. Yeah, sorry, I should have expanded on that a little bit. So we have loads of different ad networks, and I believe DFP and the Google ad network are quite good. They're ready for HTTPS, but some of our other ad networks, I think Rubicon is one of them. Don't know too much about this because I don't work directly with ads, but some of the ad networks aren't HTTPS ready. So I guess the question for us is, do we want to wait for them, or do we want to find another ad provider? Yeah, does that? Cool.
I think that's a general problem for the ad industry, that they've got to get ready for HTTP2 and HTTPS. You know, it's that's a real challenge for them. So if there's any representatives of ad networks in the room, right, get on it. All right, is what we need to say there. Right, so I'll come back to you here.
I'm just wondering if you considered implementing the crossword, which is a great ruse, with wider browser support using something like App Cache Nanny, and what your experiences were with that.
Yep. So why didn't we use App Cache? Is that okay? Yep. I think the difficulty with App Cache is it doesn't work too well with server-rendered applications, because I think App Cache will want to cache the HTML. In our case, the HTML is the content. It's not a shell of the page. I think this is the sort of infrastructure that the FT have, and I think you do client-side rendering, so you can use App Cache. Right. Right. Okay. But yeah, if we maybe we could look into using it. I don't know.
Okay, go for the last question, I'm afraid, Patrick.
Sorry. Does the cache API only accept responses that are less than F400, or does it still accept responses if they were 404? Would they be stored? And does it accept partial responses, like if the connection was closed during the downloading of an article?
Yep. So does it accept non-healthy status codes? I think you might be able to tell it to. I'm not sure if you did caches.add and then gave it a URI, it might fail. It might fall over and say, I'm not going to cache this. But if you did caches.put and explicitly said, I want to add this into the cache, at my work. I don't know. I guess that would be my intuition, but I don't know. Yep.
The problem with the cache API is that it's basically bring your own. It's so low level that you have to manage everything down to the invalidation and what you're putting in. So it will allow you to cache a 404 if for whatever crazy reason you want it to.
Okay, I will give Patrick the last word. Right? No. Come on.
I can talk to him afterwards.
He's going to talk to me afterwards. We'll get in on the conversation, right? If you want to hear what Patrick had to say. Hey, well, one last time, say thanks to Oliver for putting that talk together. Thank you. And I think it's pretty clear to everyone in the room that with the level of questions that kind of come out of doing offline stuff and service worker stuff, that it's going to be a subject matter that we're going to be talking about for many, many months. So keep coming to the group, because I'm sure that we will have more talks about service workers as time progresses. Anyway, so thanks once again, and we're going to have like a quick break, sort of like 5-6 minutes to get yourself a beer, have a toilet break, and then we'll come back to Tyler's talk. Okay, thank you.